Hello, everybody. I got Neel Muni with us. Say hello, Neel.
Hey, what's up, everybody?
All right, so for this week's episode, we got Baylor playing Oklahoma State. So we want to do something special each and every week. We'll both talk about our teams, and since it's Oklahoma State, I figured the right hat is cowboy hat.
Absolutely.
We're still going to beat y'all and everything, but at least I'm
Yeah,
showing a little bit of love.
absolutely. No, it'll be a good game.
Oh my goodness! Before I get to the questions that I want to ask you about your team, is it not a good game? This is who I've got number one and number two in our conference right now. This is huge, absolutely huge. This is going to mean a whole lot towards the end of the year as far as tiebreakers.
Absolutely. I think the reality is these two teams are going to be the front runners to lead the Big 12 once Texas and OU pack their bags and leave. I think it's going to be Baylor, Oklahoma State, and then I think BYU will be a contender, but the people that will lead the way and helping redefine what the Big 12 is going to be going forward is going to be Baylor and Oklahoma State combined.
That's a very fair assessment. That's what I feel too. If I would counter any of that, it would just be the volatility of how all these conferences are just kind of pillaging each other. But if it stays like this, yeah, I could see maybe BYU kind of creeping up, and it looks like Baylor and Oklahoma State will be the front runners for the foreseeable future because Mike Gundy ain't going nowhere, and I really really trust David Random what he's doing with our program. Got a lot of love for him. Very impressed. Um, okay, so that out of the way, let's get to know Oklahoma State a little bit. What is I know. Speaking on your defense, I heard six of your eight top tacklers are gone from last year, and I just happened across a YouTube video. You'll have to help me with the guy's name. He was a linebacker.
Yeah, Malcolm Rodriguez.
That dude is amazing looking.
Yeah,
I watched
he's a beast.
I watched him in an NFL game, and if you know anything about karate or anything, if you grab somebody by the chest and get right up to them, and then you just twist on them, you can flip anybody. They can weigh 3 times your size. Well, I watched him do this to an offensive lineman. The guy was 6'4", 340 pounds. So that's not that impressive, but it's the way he did it. He swung him over his hip, but then he took it all the way down and shoved the dude into the ground like he was just a piece of paper. It was crazy.
Well, I think those state wrestling titles are being put to good use. He is a state champion in Oklahoma at Wagner High School up in Wagner, Oklahoma. So he's got a little bit of wrestling behind him. And then, of course, I think he did a really good job of embracing Jim Knowles and his defense and learning techniques. And he's done very, very well at that next level with the Lions. And I watched a lot of the Hard Knocks as it was up in Detroit, and there was a big focus on him. So not surprised at all. Very, very intelligent young man.
Yeah. I remember not being excited for the Lions, but they either had the number one or number two pick, I believe, and they drafted Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan. Right. Well, I didn't even realize. Well, they grabbed Malcolm Rodriguez as well. That's very formidable, man. That's impressive to me. Looking really good.
He was a 6th-round pick, kind of dropped because of his size, but I think he's done a lot better. I know some people said analytics would say that he would not make it to the team, but he's starting, and that's a rarity, especially in today's NFL. At linebacker, rookies do not start very often unless you're like a generational talent such as Micah Parsons or something of that nature. So to be in that breath says a lot.
Well, especially since guys like Micah Parsons are high first-round picks. Yeah. Malcolm was a 6th-rounder pick. That makes it very more rare, as you said.
Yeah,
pretty impressed with him. As a Baylor fan, I'm glad to see him gone.
he gave Shapen a little bit of a hard time during the Big 12 tournament or Big 12 championship game, but just not enough to get that W. So still bitter.
Okay, so I talked about a guy who left. What do you think of your defense this year? Are you concerned? Do you think you'll have missed a step?
We've definitely missed a step. I think our secondary is very young. We lost all of our secondary either to the draft, to free agency, or the portal. We lost Connor. Forgot his first name, but he went over to LSU. He transferred out. once Jim Knowles left, and then we lost 3 other guys that played high number of snaps to the NFL. All of them are on NFL rosters, so that speaks highly of what we did defensively in recruiting and development. These guys were not the 5 stars that everybody glamours over, but they're good young men, and they came out and they worked hard and they earned their starting spots wherever they've gone, and or even backup roles. But to make it to that level is huge. Defensively, I think we are still really solid up front. We can bring the pressure. We've got Trace Ford, who can come off the edge. We've got Colin Oliver, who can play off the edge as well. Brock Martin, who's been there. He's a 6-year senior because of COVID. So we've got those guys. We've got some other younger guys that came back into the fold. We lost Colin Clay last year. He's back after an ACL tear early in spring training, or fall training, fall camp. So he was out all season, but he's back now, and so I think we're in good shape on the front and the middle and the linebackers. We've got some junior college transfers that are now getting acclimated. First couple of games they look lost, but I think that's just because A, we're installing a new system, and B, they're just coming in from JUCO, and it's a whole different level when you're in a D1 school, especially like a program like Oklahoma State or even a Big 12 program for that matter, and playing against another Power 5 team in Arizona. He looked like he had kind of overcome some of the mistakes he was making previously. And then we've got redshirt freshman Mason Cobb that's stepping up and starting to create some havoc as well. So,
okay, so let me talk about your outlook. What do you by the end of the year? What are you going to think of your defense? Do you think y'all are okay? If you think that maybe they take a step down, do you think maybe your offense is a little better than last year? How do you feel about that?
So I do think our defense will take a step back compared to last year. Last year's defense was phenomenal. We were number 1 in the Big 12. We were one of the best in the country, but you can't replicate what you have in a guy like Malcolm Rodriguez and then Devin Harbor, who's with the Dallas Cowboys. And then you've got 2 other guys that have made NFL rosters. And then you've got another guy who's starting at an SEC school. And then you had a couple of guys transferred to Ohio State. And then another defensive lineman who went to the NFL, and he's on a roster but not going to play much. So looking at the production we lost in defense, it's hard to replace that, especially in the Big 12 when you got high power offenses such as Baylor, who's starting to find their offensive rhythm somewhat now, and then you got Texas. Quinn Evers, I think, had he played that full game against Bama, Texas was very, very close to pulling that game off. I think OU is still dangerous. I don't think they're the danger of the past, but they're also reloading, rebuilding, and they're learning a whole new offensive system that Jeff Levy's trying to install, and he's using some of players that aren't his, and they don't truly fit his style, but those players are out there fighting hard, and once they find their chemistry, I think they're going to be back and dangerous as well. I think the Kansas State loss was maybe a little bit of a wake-up call to a few of those players, but all in all, I think Oklahoma State's going to see a step in the defense, a step back, but I think that they can still, if they can contain people, I think the offense gives them a good chance to win.
Okay, so we discussed defense fairly well. What is the difference between this year's offensive team and last year's? Who have you lost and who's replacing them?
Right. So we lost a couple of guys. We lost a couple of running backs. We lost a receiver or 2. So we're replacing those guys, but we also had a lot of receiver depth. We've recruited very well at wide receiver year after year with Casey Dunn, who's our offensive coordinator and wide receivers coach. And then you got Tim Rattay, who's worked with Spencer Sanders off season the whole time. And this is the first true off season where they had full time to meet and practice and develop. Last couple of years with COVID, it's kind of been restricted. So Spencer Sanders is seeing the field better, which last year he would be hit or miss, but he's looking like he's hitting the field better. We've got a couple of running backs that are doing really, really well, and then we got we got a true freshman that's going to start getting more snaps coming out of Texas, Ollie Gordon. And so I think in all, we're going to be okay offensively. The one area we want to look at is our passing game and keeping our offense up tempo. I think if we can do that, Spencer Sanders thrives in that. Great example of that is the Fiesta Bowl Fiesta Bowl, sorry, out in Phoenix when we were down by a lot to Notre Dame going into half, and then we came back and we just ran that up-tempo offense and we gassed people. And I think if you look at it, even at the Big 12 championship, that's what we did to Baylor is we kind of came back and gassed them in the second half. It was just inches away, and as you've posted many times to remind me, but and all Baylor fans, but yeah, not heavenly you, but yeah, but I think that's what's made the Big 12 so much better is just we know that the two schools are leaving, but we also know that OSU, Baylor have a good, healthy rivalry, and I think coaches like Aranda, Gundy, even as much as Gundy gets on my last nerve sometimes, some of these coaches are really building a strong program. And I mean, look at the Big 12 across the board. I think our coaches are some of the best in the country when you look at it as a conference as a whole. So,
yeah, I mean, you'd have to say Lance Leipold looks pretty good. Matt Campbell. We've got some solid people. It really looks like at least half of our conference has good coaches. At least half of them. And the book is kind of out on the rest of them for now. I don't know if Steve Sarkisian is the answer. Blah blah blah. I don't know about Brent Venables yet. We'll have to see how they do this year. So let's talk about the state of the Big 12 since we're already kind of there anyway. I feel like that's all the questions I have for you as far as Oklahoma State for now. It still feels very wide open to me. This is my synopsis, but I feel as if on a resume for every single team, we don't have a bad team yet. Eventually we will. We'll have at least a couple of teams that just can't compete in the Big 12. Maybe Kansas is one of them. TCU, who knows? We'll have to see. But I don't see any bad teams so far. I don't think I see any great teams. I don't know that we have a playoff caliber team in our conference yet. Maybe I'll get proven wrong. It'd be great if we did have somebody go. It'd be great if we had two people go. Right. But I still feel like it's wide open. Right now, it feels pretty clear that it's Baylor and Oklahoma State. And then, of course, we're going to have to worry about Oklahoma. We know that. I'm not as sold on Texas as I was earlier in the year, but somebody else could rise up. Maybe Kansas State will forget that Tulane loss and come back up like they were supposed to. Iowa State, I'm impressed by them. I really am. Maybe they take a step up. I feel like maybe there's 5-6 teams that could win the Big 12 championship.
Yeah, I think the Big 12 overall is very even balanced. I think there's a lot of parity in the league. A lot of these coaches are getting more out of less, so to speak. And I think great example of that is Chris Kleiman at Kansas State. They went into Norman and totally owned that game from beginning to end. There was really never did I think that OU's got this under control and they're going to come back and win. I felt like they may do that, but never was it a solid, this is just a 3/4 thing for Kansas State and OU's just going to open that can and move on and get the W. I think going into the season, I felt like Baylor was a favorite, and I thought Chapin would have definitely been a Big 12 Player of the Year running away, but he's kind of struggled a little bit here and there. I'm not sure what that's about, but maybe he's just trying to find his feet. Maybe he's trying to, and I know Baylor's lost some offensive firepower as well, so that has a lot to do with it. Iowa State right now is, I think, the top surprise. They've played really sharp, but Kansas has been magnificent. And I think if Kansas is smart, they get Leipold onto a huge contract and sign him long ways, or I think he ends up in Nebraska. It's either him or Campbell, the two Big 12 coaches. Either one of those schools lose either of those guys, and they can't do what Baylor would do with going from Rule to Aranda. There's just they don't have that type of firepower. Baylor's had some prestige in the back end, and they're building off of that. I think Oklahoma State could do the same thing. If we were to lose Gundy, we could still find someone. But Iowa State and Kansas have struck gold, and they need to make sure they lock that down before Nebraska comes calling and poaching. So as far as Venables, I think he'll be fine. He's got to just get his defensive guys that he wants, and Levy's got to get his offensive guys. But I think by the time they get it, they're in the SEC, and we don't have to worry about it.
True that. I wanted to take a look at the games. We'll just throw out a prediction if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So we have Iowa State of Kansas. Who you got?
You know what? I'm going to take Iowa State on that one. I think Kansas is good, but I think Iowa State's just a notch better, and I think the development is a little bit longer, has been there a little bit more in a longer period for Iowa State. So I think that they can best Kansas. Not that Kansas is a bad team, but just you've played some nobodies really. If you think about it, minus Duke. Duke was a pretty solid win, but for a Kansas program that struggled to get wins, that's a really big win. But I just don't think they have enough to beat Iowa State.
Well, I'll say this honestly, as far as their schedule so far, I would put it almost up there with Baylor. Baylor has played BYU and Iowa State. That's two good games out of four. Kansas has played Houston, West Virginia, and what was the last one we just Duke?
Duke, yeah.
That's not a normal cream
No.
schedule. It's not that bad, in my opinion. I'm with you there. I think Iowa State is going to end the undefeated run of Kansas. Based on, I hear that Kansas is mostly run oriented, and that's going to be a little bit difficult in the Big 12, but they are still a dangerous team with that quarterback.
Yeah.
You know, you've got a running, I mean, he's almost maybe like RG3 type of speed, or, you know, he has that type of playmaking ability. That's a very scary thing, even if you're just run oriented. So they're clearly going to upset some people this year. It really looks that way. I'm very impressed with them so far. We'll have to see what happens from there.
Absolutely.
We'll save our game for the last one.
Okay.
Let's go with West Virginia at Texas. Both of them are 2-2.
I think this is a statement win for Neil Brown. He needs this, but I also say that Steve needs this with his fan base. I think if Texas were to lose this one, I think Sarkisian would lose the fan base. I think they would say, well, maybe they just woke up for Bama, especially after going on the road and losing out, you know, so at Texas Tech. So I think that if Sarkisian wants to save face, this is the game that he's going to do it. But if Neil Brown is wanting to finally get back into the good graces of West Virginia fans, he's got to get a win here. But I'm going to take Texas. I think they just have the better talent defensively to slow down that Texas offense, and they can create some havoc. Texas is going to be able to create some havoc with the West Virginia offensive line and force JT Daniels to be on the run a lot. So.
Okay, well, this is one we'll disagree on as far as who wins. I'm going with West Virginia here, and it's not a talent deal because you can always give the talent to Texas. I'm going to go with health. I think they're a little healthier because I know they had to start off the year with two true freshman offensive linemen, and then lost another guy. Now they got three. They got a banged up quarterback who's plugging along, but I'm just going to give it to that. Xavier Worthy is hurt. They had a superstar transfer from I don't remember his name, but he came from Wyoming, and he was just kind of a beast of a guy, very reliable, had all kinds of stats last year at Wyoming. Well, he was gone for the year before he ever saw the field. I believe Jordan Whittington is their second reliable option in the passing game, and I think he's out. So you don't have Xavier Worthy or Jordan Whittington or that number 2 superstar. That's going to be tough. In other words, it's going to be Bijan. That's pretty tough if you're that predictable. So this week, I think on the road, West Virginia pulls it out, and I completely agree with you. If Texas does lose this, those fans are going to be irate, and that's a bad thing for any school. I think that's part of the culture. Like if your athletic director is worried about the fans, his head is not in the right place. You got to focus on what the coach is. You got to support him, and I don't know. That's my feeling on that game.
Yeah, I can see it either way, but I just think it's a must win for Texas. I mean, it's a must win for both, but Texas for Steve Sarkisian to get back in good graces, or start to get back in good graces. I think he's got to get this win, or it's going to be a long season for him with the fans.
Yeah, and that's what scares me about picking West Virginia is because I know Sarkisian has got to pull out at all stops. They've got to win this game. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens there. We'll go to our fourth game. We got Texas Tech going to Kansas State, number 25 Kansas State.
I think it's a win for Kansas State. They're at home, number one. Number two, Hudson Card was not able to run very well, and that's because he is banged up. I think.
Hudson Card, he's from Texas.
Well, for Texas, right? But what I'm saying is he couldn't run very well against Texas Tech, so he became a little bit more of a pocket passer. And I think Adrian Martinez is going to be able to run like he did against OU. And I think that's going to be the difference maker in that game besides being at home. So I think I'm going to go with Kansas State, and I think Texas Tech really put a lot of focus in on beating Texas. I think they were all in on that, and I think that they may be a little overhyped at this point.
That's fair enough. Tech has actually completely impressed me. They had a loss, but it was against North Carolina State, who was 17th at the time. So once again, not a bad resume for anybody. I'm going with Tech because I just have this weird feeling that Kansas State might be on an up and down deal. Like Adrian Martinez was so down on himself after the Tulane loss that he promised his teammates he was going to be there for him, and he blew it up. Had the game of his career against Oklahoma. That was an amazing game. I don't know if you watched it. He tore them up. He looked incredible. He had he had 5 total touchdowns, and 4 of them were rushing, long runs. He was so impressive when he was scrambling. He was throwing dimes while he was being chased. Very impressive. If he was always like that, he'd still be at Nebraska talking about national titles. But I think maybe kind of up and down. I'm going to go with maybe Kansas State coming off such a high. I don't know. Could be completely wrong there. Maybe Kansas State is a little bit better than I'm giving credit for, but that Tulane loss scares me a lot. And Tech, I just don't feel like Tech has had a bad game yet. They struggled against Texas, but, Texas is very talented. It's up in the air for me. I'll disagree with you there, and I'll just go with Tech just because.
Yeah. But Kleiman has also had bad losses. If you look at back in history, he's lost he's had some bad losses. I can't remember who he lost with there at Kansas State early on in the non-conference, but then has had some really good conference wins. So that's something that I'm also looking into.
Okay. All right. Well, we got another game here. I don't think we're going to disagree on this one. We've got number 18, Oklahoma at TCU.
I think this is a game that OU is going to come out. They're going to be angry from the last week. From everything I've heard, Venables has ripped into the team. I think he's going to have a fire under his butt to get going. There's already been some chatter amongst Oklahoma fans, the true Oklahoma fans that are like, hey, it's a rebuild year. But the fans that, need the OU victories and, that they clamor for that. You can hear some of them saying, yeah, this may have been a hire that we should have waited for. But I think that this is OU running away. I think we're going to see a different type of defense. I think they made a lot of bad plays defensively. They were missing tackles that they should have made. And I think that TCU is just going to pay for what Kansas State did. And it's not going to be fun. And it's not going to be close.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't know what else I can really add to that. I think pretty much everything you said verbatim. I think Oklahoma's going to come in pissed off. There's no way in the world Oklahoma's going to want to start off the Big 12 0-2. It'd be laughable for us, but I don't really see it happening. There's just too much talent there, too much pride. And, think about it. Their worst years over the last, 20 years has been like 8 wins. So just a lot of pride there. I can't see them not just going in there and destroying TCU. TCU has had good points on the resume against bad teams, but their schedule among all the other Big 12 teams has been the weakest. They haven't faced anybody.
Absolutely.
So I got one last game, and I know we're going to disagree on this one.
We may be surprised.
Okay, so before I talk about the game, let me ask you this: y'all just got off of your bye week. In my opinion, the worst time to have a bye week is that early. And then on top of that, remind me of your opponents. You played Central Michigan. You played who else?
We played Arizona State, so P5, but a really weak P5. They've already fired their coach. So they've already moved on from Herm Edwards. He's a great coach. So that tells you that what type of affair they're in right there. And then we played
University of
Arkansas
Auburn.
Pine Bluff, so D2 school almost, or it is one, but yeah.
So my point there is, not only is that a bad time to have the bye, but Baylor's going to be a big step up.
Yeah.
And y'all haven't had to practice against anybody but yourselves. And in preparation for this, I don't see that as a good thing. Not that I'm talking trash or anything. I'm not. But that's not the ideal scenario I would want, to come off a bye and then finally face what will be your competition. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So let's get into the game. How do you think this will play out?
I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think it's going to be a little bit of back and forth offensively. I think defensively, we're going to see some stops here and there. But I think the difference is going to be Baylor, Blake Shapen, and how he does. It's going to be in the hands of both quarterbacks. If Sanders can make smart throws and run when he needs to run and get the heck out of the pocket and move, then he can become a nightmare for Baylor. And if Shapen can find those passes and those passing lanes and he can hit his passers in stride, then it's going to be a big game for him. So I think it's going to be back and forth. I think the key is going to be Baylor's defense. If they can stop our offense, then I think our defense still has a long ways to go. And I think that Baylor's defense could be the difference maker between this and possibly, or I think Baylor gets this one.
So one of the things I've been hearing, trying to preview this game specifically, is that y'all's run has kind of been lackluster as compared to your passing attack. So this was a suggestion of people that were talking about the game. They were saying that normally a defense are going to want to shut down the run and then force the pass. From what I'm hearing, that they may do the opposite. They may just go ahead and back up and force the pass because we feel like we can contain a run against a lot of people. If y'all are struggling, maybe they're going to worry about the pass first and then deal with the run as it comes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, our running game hasn't been the best. I think, we beat up on Arkansas Pine Bluff, but that's really not much to brag about. Our offensive line is still trying to gel. We just make a lot of mental mistakes. We don't pick up blocks, and that's a huge thing, especially when you're playing an experienced front four against Baylor. So.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, let me see how I want to lay this out. Okay, so if the part of Blake Shapen's struggles thus far have been that all of our receivers are gone. We just threw in a new wide receiver room pretty much. We've got a few guys that have been there, but no production over the years. So now it's kind of like playing with new toys and everything, which is scary from a defensive standpoint that, well, we don't know what they're good at. It's scary on our standpoint because we don't know who we can rely on. The key to me will be our offensive line. If we give Shapen time, our receivers are good enough and have shown flashes. Our running game, I'm not concerned at all. I'm really not. We have a great system where we're like throwing 4 guys in there, keeping them healthy, and that's just difficult. That's going to wear you out, as opposed to just having a Bijan Robinson to wear you out maybe by the middle of the third quarter. We're going to have fresh guys the entire way. They're very productive. They're very explosive. We've got a couple of stronger guys. We got a true freshman, Richard Reese, that I'm way high on, and he's 175 pounds. I outweigh him by like 10 pounds or so. Little guy, a little scat back. He's fast, explosive, but man, he bounces off tackles. It's crazy. If you happen to see this one highlight from our last game, he bounced off like 6 guys into the end zone, and that is crazy for a smaller guy. Very impressed with him. I'm not worried about our running game unless we have troubles passing. If y'all load the box on us, then that's going to be very difficult for us. I'm going with Baylor. We're at home, but of course y'all could win this. I completely believe. I'm not arrogant in it. I think we'll win, but I'm not arrogant about it. I'm not that confident in it. It's very good.
Well, Vegas has the line, I think, right at 3, which is basically a pick 'em because 3-point favorite for home team. So I think all in all, it's going to be a good game. I think Vegas is saying it's going to be close. So, and Vegas does surprise me from time to time. So, but they know what they're doing. So I think it will be a good game. Like I said, it can go back and forth, but it just depends on which quarterback has the hot hand and which one's being able to wheel and deal and make plays happen. I think that's going to be the biggest difference maker.
Okay, so we've talked about our state of the Big 12, how we feel about the conference as a whole. We've picked each game. Do you have any questions for me about Baylor, our personnel?
Yeah, absolutely. How do you feel about your defense? I know last year your defense was hit or miss, a little bit suspect here and there, but they kind of put everything together, and then they really showed out at the Big 12 championship, and even more so at the Sugar Bowl. So how do you feel about them? What's their outlook for the year?
Okay, so you mentioned defensive line, and that on paper should be a very huge strength. I mean, we should really literally rank up with Alabama, Georgia, and I'm not being braggadocious. I truly believe that. I truly believe we got at least 6 guys that should make the NFL. We have star power on there, but that's on paper. I'm hoping it's a little bit like last year, how you said it was a little hit or miss, but then when we got to the big games against Oklahoma, we demolished Spencer Rattler and Caleb Williams, made them look foolish. We gave Spencer Sanders a bad game because of the 4 picks, even though like 2 of them were just tipped. But it gave him a bad game, gave him a lot of problems there. When we got to Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl, we got 10 sacks. So I'm hoping that, that we kind of figure out what we, figured out last year. But the problem is that we didn't lose anybody from the defensive line. We should already be at that level. We should already be better. We even brought in a highly recruited junior college transfer, and Jackson Player, supposed to be another star of the defensive line. And I was sitting there salivating, thinking, oh, well, we're going to destroy this offensive line and then this one and then this one. And it wasn't until Iowa State that we started to kind of show some pressure. So our defensive line kind of collapsed the offensive line, and all of a sudden this safety, this linebacker, this safety, this cornerback are getting sacks. That is going to make us very dangerous. Our secondary is very unproven, but we do have a couple of stars and apparently a lot of promise and potential. And they've looked good so far. I trust in Dave Aranda. I really do. I can point to one specific thing. When I interviewed the Iowa State fan last week, he was talking about how evenly matched the coaching philosophies were amongst Aranda and Matt Campbell. Well, here's a big difference that I noticed in the game, and it was when there were some questionable foul calls on Iowa State. Matt Campbell called a timeout and reamed the coach, the referees, took time off to do that. Well, I'm telling you, when that happens to Dave Aranda, he doesn't argue. He's literally talking to his coaches. Okay, this is what we're going to do the next play. Like, he is completely hyper-focused, and I see that from his team. I see them as hyper-focused. They don't beat their chest all game long and hoop and holler. They're so focused. To me, a very dangerous team, and I really feel good about our future. It's the type of recruits that he brings in. He preaches the player over the person over the player. He focuses on that first, and these kids love him. They buy into the system. Very focused team. Baylor will very rarely be outcoached in a game. That's my opinion. So that's how I feel about that. I kind of went off on a tangent, but as far as defense, I don't have any worries there. We're looking good enough. I don't see a lot of dominance yet, but I see the signs that it's coming. So that's kind of how I feel about the defense. Any other aspects?
Yeah, what about Blake Shapen? I felt like last year he ended on a high note, and now I feel like and maybe he hasn't regressed. Maybe it's just the fact that he has new receivers and he's working with a whole new bunch, and the chemistry's off. But if you put it on paper and you kind of look at where he ended and where he's starting, especially against some of the talent or some of the teams you've played, you would have thought his numbers would have been a little bit better. What gives, or what do you think might be the situation there?
Okay, so in you're dead on correct there. He hasn't tore it up passing wise. He showed out a little bit against Iowa State, and if you follow the game, we were up 14 points, 17 points, then Iowa State would score, and we'd get back up to 14 points, and then Iowa State would score. So we couldn't quite put it away, but you're right about those receivers. He's got to gel with them, and that's where I hoped our defensive and offensive lines would kind of help kind of take over games and give them time. And now he's still kind of doing it on the fly. Last year, remember, he had Tyquan Thornton, who was a high second or low first round pick for the Patriots. He was our superstar, reliable receiver. We lost him, so that could have easily played into why he looked much more dominant than he is this year. And he's got to find that guy. We've got one explosive guy who has been injured half the season. I think he's going to be back. And then we're relying on a 6-year wide receiver who's just now starting to show some really good production. It's going to take a little bit of time, but I see the signs that they're there. We're trusting on Hal Presley. And Gavin Holmes is that 6-year wide receiver who ran a kickoff back and then ran another one almost all the way back and then caught a nice touchdown. But here we are in the meat of our schedule, which almost the entire rest of the season is a meat of the schedule because of the strength of the Big 12. So now, can he still show progression against Oklahoma State? Can he still do that against Texas, a good defense at Texas or Oklahoma? That is yet to be seen. I like the progress. I'm not scared, but I'm not confident either that he's just going to pick back up. Doesn't have quite the wide receivers he had last year. So that's my feeling on maybe Blake Shapen's development. He had that bad game against BYU, and he beat himself up about that. I don't like that. I like people to keep their confidence on an even keel, and he got down on that. So I'm a little down about that, but he came back and looked good and then beat Iowa State and played well there. But you're right in your assessment about the passing game being off, because every game that we've won has been because of our running backs and our running offense. And then the game that we lost at BYU, we were in it because of our running backs. We couldn't get anything going passing. And it looks like we're kind of switching that up a little bit. And we had, in my opinion, had a complete game against Iowa State. Offensive line looked better. Our defensive line started to finally collapse the offensive line. Our receivers looked very good. Our running backs have looked good all year, including Iowa State. Shapen looked better. It was pretty much a complete game. And what turned out to be a 31-24 victory easily could have been 17, 24 points. So looking good there. And I feel confident we can get better. That doesn't mean we're going to win out,
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be an undefeated team in the Big 12. I mean, it's such a heavy loaded conference. You got Kansas State, who's playing really well. I think Oklahoma State, Baylor, Oklahoma, Texas are the top four. I think they finish in the top four, and then everything else behind it is still going to be very competitive. I don't think, like last year, I think we kind of figured out who the top 3 teams were, and then everything else was a scat after that. But this year, I think it's for the taking. It's wide open. I think Matt Campbell's bringing Iowa State back. Last year was a little bit of a drop off for him. But I think they're going to be just fine coming back into it, unless he leaves and heads over to Nebraska, which, there's that rumor, and hopefully he doesn't. We definitely need all the good coaches we can keep in the Big 12 as we progress and find our new identity, and hopefully we go out and we expand and we build the conference. I don't think we're left for dead yet, but, if we don't make some moves, I think we are.
Yeah, so I'll touch up on that a little bit. You we're talking about the strength of the entire conference as a whole, and we have people that love to kind of troll and have some fun in the group and everything, and they'll say, "Oh well, I hope y'all lose. I hope y'all lose," and I'm of a different mindset. And I'll take you back to the Baylor basketball national championship. Well, think of that. The teams that they had to face, the better the conference was, the more battle-tested Baylor was. And when they get to the March Madness, they were ready, they were prepared. You could say the same thing with Kansas last year. They were ready, they were prepared, because our conference as a whole was better. If we're better and playing better competition, yeah, we might lose a recruit to another team, but that strength, iron sharpens iron,
Yep, absolutely. So,
Yeah. Well, do you have any other questions about Baylor that
no,
you don't feel you know enough about them?
I still have nightmares from last year. So, no, I think Baylor's a great team. I hope that they do well outside of this weekend. I hope we get to see you guys again in the Big 12 championship. I think it's good for the conference to have that type of game versus either OU or Texas being in there. It doesn't do the conference any good anymore. I think with both of those schools on the inside looking out, I think it's best that we start picking it up with Baylor, Texas Tech, or OSU, or even TCU. I think these schools got to step up and make a statement and say, "Hey, we're going to take this conference and we're going to start helping own it."
So, you were talking about coaches and how it's good to have good coaches. Well, we're going to be adding Luke Fickell from Cincinnati and Kalani Sitake from BYU. That's not going to hurt us at all.
No.
It's going to be a murderer's row. It looks like.
Yeah, so I think coaching wise, we're going to be just fine. We're losing a couple of good coaches in Venables and Sark. Well, Sark's still still on the fence, but I think Venables will be just fine. Speaking of OU, I think once they get to the SEC, I think they'll acclimate pretty well quickly compared to Texas. I think Texas will be on that struggle bus for a while, but that's a whole different conversation for a different time. But overall, I think the Big 12 is in a good position with coaches, and I think even going forward, I think the Big 12, if they can poach a couple of good schools, I mean, obviously the Four Corners is out there in the West is going to be part of that, but I do think that they've got to go and pick up a school like a Virginia Tech, who's on the outside looking in. But I think the ACC is the next to collapse. I think Big Ten's going to raid that, and I think the SEC is going to raid a couple. But I think a lot of those schools are going to head over to the Big Ten, and I think it's going to leave a few schools open for the Big 12 to go poach. I think Pittsburgh's going to be one of those. I think Virginia Tech, and hopefully, they're already working those deals if they want to survive.
Yeah, I guess the last point on my mind is I remember, what was it, maybe about 10 years ago, Texas and I think OU flirted with going to the Pac-12. At that point, with the state of Baylor, I was pretty concerned.
Right.
Now I'm not going to sit there and just watch video after video and research. Well, this team's going there. This conference is going to do that. I don't have time for all that stress anyway. Whatever happens, happens. Hopefully we stay as strong as we are. Hopefully we don't lose any more teams and can have more. That would be nice. I hope for that. And if it doesn't happen, hopefully Baylor's okay and Oklahoma State's okay and everybody's okay. I don't know that I really want to see everything collapse and it's just two teams and then, you got 12 teams going to playoffs and 10 of them come from those two conferences. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
well, I hope so. I think it's going to be better for both Oklahoma State, Baylor. I think both schools are going to emerge as leaders, and hopefully our presidents and our ADs work together along with everybody else in the Big 12 and create a powerful conference to, rebound back to. I think we're going to see resiliency from the Big 12, and I think some people are kind of shocked that the Big 12 is rebounding so quickly and so well at the same time. So,
yeah, got a lot of teams that are ranked, and hopefully we can get some more up in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to see that, and would love to watch some new rivalries build. Hopefully, we can get Baylor and Oklahoma State to play in Jerry World maybe every third year. Once at Baylor, once at OSU, and then once at Jerry World, or once down in Houston. I think that helps recruiting. So I think it's a good way for both fan bases to partake in something bigger than the universities and come together and show that we are a strong conference. So.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, Neel, I'm gonna thank you for giving us some insight into Oklahoma State, and thank you for being on this new little venture channel that I'm trying to piggyback a little bit off of the fun that we all had in Big Sports and Snack, a friendship group, the Facebook page.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I hope this kind of grows, and hope we get some more likes and subscribes in here and kind of build this up a little bit. We're a little little time right now, but hopefully this
start somewhere.
Learn to have some fun here. Huh?
Got to start somewhere. Hopefully, we can do a 12-school panel and have a rep from every school, and we can just continue the banter here. We can get our friends Jacob Boyer, Alicia Fennell, and others like them in here, and we can have a round table discussion, have some fun, and just have a good time. Before they head out to the SEC, and then we find other members and get BYU fans in here, and UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston, and we have our fun and we take our jabs. But I think as a whole, we're it's always fun to talk smack, but when it comes down to it, for being family, I think we do a great job in the group as a whole. So,
Man, you make me kind of want to touch up on something. I'm not going to mention the name, and I wouldn't want you to, or the situation. But yeah, so you let me in on a little something that was going on behind the scenes, and it kills me. And so this female, has something, maybe the worst thing in her life going on right now. Member of the group, and I hope that people understand how you can talk trash about a coach, a quarterback, a player, a school, and realize at the end of the day what your words might do to another human being. I hope people keep that in context and know just how to have fun and back off. Have a little fun and then back off, and not take things too far. I think we have a good group of admins that kind of help control that too.
Yeah, we do. I think our admins are very they're lovable people, and we all know that, hey, we're all human and we're going to have fun, but at the end of the day, we're going to make sure it's respectful. We don't want anyone to step lines that shouldn't be stepped, and we should enjoy the community. It's a community, and at the end of the day, we're all part of a greater community, and we got to lift each other up and be there for each other through the best times and the worst times. And if you can't be part of that, then you're really not part of the group that we want to build and have a desire for. So
yeah. And to our credit, we have booted very, very few people. I never sought out, and I never asked y'all, hey, let's get as many people in here as possible. I never did that. I wanted it to be organic. I wanted basically every admin to sit there and say, is this a cool person or not? Because we only want the cool kids here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. We don't need a huge group, right? We just need a group that knows how to talk, knows how to have fun, and knows how to represent their school and represent the Big 12 as a whole. And then after that, that's what matters. But if you're going to be a jerk about things, then we don't want you to be part of that. So,
exactly. Very well put, Mr. Neel. Once again, thank you so much for helping me out with this today, and I wish all the best.
Same.
Win, lose, or draw, I wish all the best. And going forward, if y'all lose, I hope we see you in the Big 12 championship, and best of luck to y'all there as well. I guess we'll go ahead and end this for today. I'm gonna end this like I always do. Sick 'em, baby.
Go Pokes. We got this.
All right, you have a good one, Neel.
Take care.